I'm Jack.
And I'm Misha.
And today we are jumping into a brand new deep dive. We're looking at the February 2026 annual report, so the 10K for Solventum Corporation.
Right, ticker symbol SOLV.
Exactly, SOLV. And we really want to unpack their 2025 financial performance today. Because if you are an investor or, healthcare professional, or honestly just someone who's fascinated by massive corporate spin-offs, Solventum is, well, it's pretty much a textbook case.
Yeah, a textbook case of a newly independent company really just trying to find its footing.
Right. And on paper, if you just look at the headlines, their 2025 net income absolutely exploded. I mean, it tripled compared to 2024.
Which is wild. But as we're going to see, looking just under the surface of those headline numbers reveals a completely different reality.
Yeah, a much more complicated one. They are carrying this $5 billion mountain of debt for one.
Right, and there's this hidden supply chain dependency on their former parent company, 3M, that could honestly unravel their most profitable product lines.
It really is the ultimate lesson in why, the top-line numbers in an earnings press release often hide the actual mechanics of a business.
Oh, 100%. And before we can even start to tear apart that massive profit jump, you really need a clear picture of how Solventum actually generates cash every single day.
Right. What do they actually do?
Exactly. So they were officially spun off from 3M in April 2024. And they basically operate three main segments. You've got MedSurg, which covers medical and surgical supplies. Then dental solutions. And third is health information systems, or HIS.
Right, which means they are essentially running two very different types of businesses under one roof.
Yeah, they really are.
On the hardware side, they manufacture physical medical goods. We're talking transparent IV film dressings, negative pressure wound therapy devices, and, advanced dental cements.
All the physical stuff a hospital needs.
Exactly. And then on the software side, they build digital infrastructure. Like their flagship product is the 360 Encompass software.
Right, the clinician productivity tool.
Yeah, it's a productivity and coding tool. And to understand why that specific software matters so much, you kind of have to look at who is actually buying these products.
Which is not your average consumer.
No, not at all. Solventum caters to these massive institutional customers. So they sell to hospital networks, global university systems, government agencies, major research institutions.
Organizations.
Right. Entities that, frankly, do not make purchasing decisions quickly. And when they do, they sign multi-year contracts.
Yeah, the lock-in is intense.
It really is. Like when a hospital network implements 360 Encompass, that software integrates directly into their electronic health records, stuff like Epic or Cerner.
Right.
And it uses natural language processing to read a doctor's clinical notes, and then it automatically suggests the correct billing codes for the insurance claim.
Which saves the hospital a ton of time.
Exactly. And once a hospital trains, say, 5,000 doctors and billing specialists on that specific interface, the switching costs become astronomically high. They were just locked in.
Yeah, they're not going to just switch vendors next year, which turns Solventum's business model into this highly lucrative hybrid.
Yeah.
You basically have a combination of the classic razor and blades model operating right alongside modern software as service, or SaaS.
Right, the physical and the digital.
Exactly. The hardware side functions on sheer physical reliance. Like a hospital buys a piece of Solventum medical equipment. That's the razor handle, right?
Sure.
But to actually treat patients with it every day, they have to continually purchase the proprietary consumables, the specialized tapes, the sterile tubes, the wound dressings. Those are the blades.
And those get thrown away and replenished daily.
Every single day. So you combine that recurring physical revenue with the recurring digital revenue of the software subscriptions, plus post-contract IT support, and you have this cash flow engine that is designed for incredible stability.
It's a great model. And they're also spending huge amounts of capital right now to evolve that product mix, right? To build a deeper economic moat around their hardware.
Yeah, they are definitely trying to upgrade the blades, so to speak.
Right. So late in 2025, Solventum spent $696 million in cash to acquire a privately held bioscience company called Acera Surgical.
Wow, almost $700 million.
Yeah, in cash. And there's actually a contingent payment of another $125 million if Acera hits specific sales milestones later on.
So this was a big bet.
A massive bet. And they didn't just buy like another bandage manufacturer. Acera specializes in developing fully engineered synthetic materials for regenerative wound care.
Oh, okay, so a lot more advanced.
Exactly. Instead of just covering a wound, These materials actively interact with the body's biology to promote tissue growth.
Oh, wow.
Right. So by bringing that highly advanced proprietary materials engineering in-house, Solventum is basically trying to ensure their blades remain so technologically superior that cheaper, generic competitors just can't undercut them in hospital procurement bids.
Because if the hospital wants the advanced healing, they have to buy from Solventum.
Exactly. The underlying logic is that owning the intellectual property for advanced biomaterials allows for much higher pricing power.
Right, which leads us perfectly into the numbers. Let's actually look at how that business model translated into actual revenues for 2025.
Let's do it.
So total net sales hit $8.32 billion.
Okay, 8.32 billion.
Yeah, which is a slight increase from the $8.25 billion they reported in 2024. And importantly, their organic growth was positive.
Driven mostly by the software, right?
Exactly, driven heavily by the adoption and expansion of that HS software across more healthcare networks. So the top line, the revenue, is incredibly stable.
But as you know, the top line only tells you how much money walked through the front door. The gross margin is what tells you how much it actually costs to keep the lights on and keep the assembly lines running.
Right.
So to find that gross margin, you take that $8.32 billion in sales, and you subtract the physical cost of manufacturing the medical devices, purchasing raw materials, running the software servers, all of that.
The cost of sale.
Right, the cost of sales. And in 2025, Solventum's cost of sales was $3.87 billion.
Okay.
So that leaves them with a gross profit of $4.45 billion.
Yeah.
And if you do the math on that, their gross margin for 2025 was roughly 53.5%.
Which honestly reveals a pretty troubling trend when you compare it to the previous year.
Right.
Because in 2024, their gross margin was 55.6%. So it shrank by over 2 full percentage points in just a single year.
Okay, hang on, because that math doesn't actually make sense to me.
How so?
Well, we just established that their organic sales growth is being driven by software adoption, right?
Yeah.
And software typically carries an incredibly high gross margin. Because, once the code is written, distributing it to another hospital doesn't require spinning up a new factory or buying raw steel.
Right. The marginal cost is basically zero.
Exactly. So if high-margin software is growing as a percentage of their total revenue, their overall cost of sales should technically be going down proportionally. Why is the gross margin actually shrinking?
It's a great question. And the answer exposes this massive structural vulnerability that is hidden deep within the risk factor section of their 10K.
Okay.
It comes down entirely to their supply chain. You see, Solventum relies on their former parent company, 3M, as a sole source supplier for inputs that accounted for $3 billion of Solventum's 2025 revenue.
Wait, $3 billion?
$3 billion.
That is nearly 40% of their entire global sales relying on a single vendor.
Yep, and it gets crazier. $2 billion of that revenue is tied to a specific material manufactured through a proprietary 3M process that Solventum simply cannot replicate.
You kidding?
I'm not. The physical chemistry required to make medical-grade adhesives, materials that can stick firmly to sweating human skin for 72 hours without causing tissue damage when you whip them off, that is fiercely protected intellectual property.
And 3M owns it.
3M owns the secret sauce for those adhesives. So when Solventum spun off, 3M agreed to continue supplying these materials during a transition period, but Solventum is basically entirely at their mercy regarding pricing.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. As inflation hits the chemical precursors, 3M just passes those costs directly onto Solventum, and that is what squeezes Solventum's gross margins.
Wow. It's like moving out of your parents' house to finally be a completely independent adult.
Right.
But you still rely on them to buy your groceries every single week because they have this secret recipe for your favorite meals, and they legally
And if that supply agreement eventually expires, and Solventum hasn't engineered their own alternative adhesives, or if they just haven't successfully transitioned their manufacturing facilities to produce them at scale, that $2 billion in revenue is severely at risk.
Okay, so they are highly dependent on their former parent, and the cost to manufacture their core products went up.
Right.
Which makes the bottom line numbers they reported on their income statement, frankly, bizarre.
Yeah, the math doesn't seem to add up at first glance.
Not at all. Because if you were looking at the headline net income, it went from $479 million in 2024 to $5 billion in 2025.
It more than tripled.
It more than tripled.
Yeah.
And that bottom line explosion drove their net margins, the percentage of revenue they'd keep after all operating expenses, taxes, interest payments, from 5.8% up to a massive 18.7%.
Which is huge. And that surge completely warped their return metrics, too. It made the company look like this absolute powerhouse of capital efficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. For those of you looking at the balance sheet, ROE, or return on equity, measures how effectively management is using shareholder capital to generate profits.
Right.
And you calculate it by taking the net income and dividing it by the shareholder's equity. So in 2025, Solventum had an ending equity balance of $5.04 billion.
Okay.
With $1.55 billion in net income, their ROE for 2025 sits at an astonishing 30.8%.
Which is practically unheard of.
Yeah, for a mature, heavy manufacturing healthcare company.
Yeah.
An ROE of nearly 31% usually indicates that management has executed like a flawless operational turnaround.
But this is the crucial illusion in the financial report.
The trick?
Exactly. That tripling of net income was not an operational miracle at all. It was a structural divestiture.
Ah.
Yeah. In September 2025, Solventum sold its purification and filtration business to Thermo Fisher Scientific for $4 billion in cash.
$4 billion?
$4 billion. They completely unloaded an entire division because, honestly, industrial water filtration didn't align with their core focus on hospitals and dental clinics.
Which makes strategic sense.
It does. But that transaction resulted in a one-time pre-tax gain of $1.5 billion. And that gain was injected directly into their 2025 income statement.
Okay, so they basically just sold off a massive asset, recorded the profit from the sale, and presented it alongside their normal operational earnings.
Exactly. And it gets even deeper because selling that asset triggered a chain reaction in their tax liabilities.
How so?
Well, in 2024, Solventum's effective tax rate was 20.9%. But in 2025, it plummeted to 9.2%.
Wait, why would it drop that much just because they sold something?
Because when you structure a $4 billion divestiture, companies can often utilize accumulated capital loss carryforwards from the whole complex spin-off process, or they allocate the tax basis in a way that aggressively shelters that income.
Accounting magic.
Pretty much. So the combination of a $1.5 billion cash gain and a historically low tax rate created this perfect storm for their net income.
So if you strip away that one-time windfall from the Thermo Fisher sale, the underlying operational profit story basically aligns perfectly with the shrinking gross margins we discussed earlier.
Precisely. The core business of selling medical devices and health software is highly stable, yes, but it certainly did not triple its profitability overnight.
No.
That $1.5 billion gain is a singular event. It's not going to be there to pad the earnings in 2026.
And this highlights exactly why an income statement can be so deceptive. I mean, it includes these non-recurring accounting gains.
Right.
To see the cold, hard reality of a business, you really have to look at the statement of cash flows. You have to trace the actual dollars moving in and out of the corporate bank account.
Yes. Cash is king.
Always. And looking at their operational cash flow tells the real story of the spin-off penalty. From 2023 to 2024, their cash generated from daily operations actually dropped significantly.
Yeah, and that drop was the direct result of the staggering costs associated with separating from a massive conglomerate like 3M.
Right. People forget how expensive a spin-off is.
It's unbelievable. When you spin off, you don't just, get a new logo. You have to build entirely new enterprise resource planning software from scratch.
Yeah.
You have to untangle thousands of global IT systems. You have to hire a completely new C-suite, build your own human resources department, staff up an internal legal team.
All the boring, expensive stuff.
Exactly. Setting up that independent corporate infrastructure burns hundreds of millions of dollars in cash up front.
Wow. But by 2025, that operational cash flow stabilized, right?
It did, yeah.
But the investing cash flows show a massive spike, which makes sense because that is where the $4 billion in cash from selling the purification and filtration business actually arrived in the bank account.
Right, the cash finally hit.
But they didn't just let that cash sit idle and earn interest, though. They immediately deployed nearly $700 million of it to fund that Acera Surgical acquisition we talked about earlier.
Right, the advanced wound care company.
Exactly. So they effectively swapped a mature, slow-growing industrial filtration asset for a high-growth, proprietary biomaterials asset.
Which is a bold move. And after all of that buying and selling, The balance sheet at the end of 2025 shows Solventum sitting on $878 million in cash and cash equivalents.
Okay, so almost $1 billion.
Yeah. And on the surface, nearly $1 billion in liquidity seems like a very comfortable cushion to fund their operations and their internal research.
Sure, but there is a massive catch to that cash position, though.
Oh, huge one.
Because approximately $878 million is held overseas by their foreign subsidiaries.
Yeah.
Only about $78 million is physically sitting in United States bank accounts.
Which is a tiny fraction.
Right. And if Solventum needs to use that overseas cash to fund domestic operations or, pay off U.S.-based liabilities, repatriating that money across borders can trigger significant withholding taxes.
Yep.
Which would immediately eat into that cash pile and drive up their currently artificially low effective tax rate.
And they desperately need flexible cash because of the other side of the balance sheet.
The debt.
The debt. During the spin-off process, 3M loaded Solventum with a towering $5 billion in outstanding debt.
$5 billion.
$5 billion. That is an enormous amount of leverage for a newly independent company. So a massive portion of the cash they generate from selling IV dressings and coding software doesn't actually go toward paying dividends to shareholders or even funding new product development.
Where does it go?
It goes straight to servicing the interest payments on that $5 billion debt burden.
Ouch. Which perfectly frames the two massive execution risks Solventum faces over the next 24 months.
Yeah, let's talk about those.
The first one is this internal initiative they are calling the Transform for the Future restructuring program.
Right.
Basically, to fix those shrinking gross margins and handle their debt, management is attempting to slash operational costs, optimize their global manufacturing footprint, and drastically streamline their supply chain.
Which sounds great on paper, but any large-scale restructuring introduces severe operational risk.
Definitely.
When you close manufacturing plants and consolidate supply lines, you risk disrupting your own inventory. You risk losing key personnel with specialized institutional knowledge, and you incur these unexpected severance and relocation costs.
I mean, executing a global restructuring program while simultaneously trying to stabilize a newly spun-off company is, well, it's like trying to perform open-heart surgery on yourself while running a marathon.
That is a terrifying image, but very accurate.
Right. One wrong cut to your supply chain, and you just bleed out in the form of massive product shortages for critical hospital clients.
And you cannot afford to lose those hospitals.
No.
But the second overarching risk is even bigger, honestly. It's environmental and regulatory, and it centers entirely around PFAS.
Forever chemicals.
Yes. Per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, commonly known as forever chemicals. 3M has faced historic multi-billion-dollar liabilities over environmental contamination and health impacts related to PFAS.
Right, it's been all over the news for years.
Exactly. And Solventum utilizes these chemicals heavily. Specific O-rings, specialized gaskets, sterile membranes, electronic components within their medical devices. They either contain PFAS or they actively require PFAS in the manufacturing process.
But when the spinoff was finalized, didn't 3M agree to indemnify Solventum for product liability claims related to PFAS?
They did. They effectively provided an insurance policy.
Okay.
But that indemnification agreement has a hard expiration date, the end of 2025.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Starting in 2026, Solventum is standing on the edge of a regulatory cliff without a safety net. They carry full, independent liability for any PFAS-related components remaining in their global supply chain.
That is a huge liability hanging over them.
It is. Now, they are actively trying to transition to non-PFAS alternative materials. But in the medical device industry, you cannot simply swap a chemical compound in a factory and ship the new product the next morning.
Because of the FDA.
Exactly. Every material change requires rigorous biocompatibility testing to ensure the new compound doesn't cause toxic reactions in patients. You have to submit complex 510(k) applications to the FDA, wait months for regulatory review, and just hope the agency agrees that the new material is safe and effective.
Wow.
And if Solventum cannot engineer these chemicals out of their thousands of product SKUs quickly enough, they absorb a potentially catastrophic legal and regulatory liability.
So just summarizing the reality of this 10K for you, Solventum is an $8.3 billion revenue giant.
Yes.
They have a brilliant business model that pairs the recurring physical revenue of medical consumables with the high-margin digital lock-in of health information software.
It's a great foundation.
Wow. It is. But you have to actively ignore the headline that their net income tripled. Because that was a one-time accounting reality driven by selling off a major asset.
Right.
Underneath that windfall, they are fighting shrinking gross margins, carrying a heavily leveraged $5 billion balance sheet, and attempting a highly risky internal restructuring.
It really is the ultimate corporate transition story. They have the assets to succeed, but their execution has to be completely flawless. And the timeline for that execution is shrinking rapidly due to an external market factor.
Right, because 3M still owns 14.8% of Solventum's outstanding stock.
Exactly.
And 3M's management has publicly stated their intention to systematically sell off that entire position by 2029.
Which is huge.
Yeah, you have a massive shareholder preparing to flood the open market with millions of shares, which inherently puts heavy downward pressure on Solventum's stock price over the next few years.
And if you combine that looming downward pressure on their valuation with the expiration of the PFAS indemnification and the eventual end of the $3 billion supply agreement for critical proprietary materials, it forces us to consider a pretty devastating scenario.
What's that?
What happens if, while Solventum is burning time and cash trying to clear the FDA hurdles for non-PFAS materials, a smaller, more agile competitor quietly corners the market on those new, compliant alternative chemicals?
Oh, that is a terrifying thought for their executives.
It really is.
Because hospital procurement boards are increasingly adopting strict environmental purchasing guidelines.
Yep.
If a competitor secures the supply chain for non-PFAS alternatives before Solventum completes its transition, Solventum wouldn't just face regulatory fines. They could find themselves entirely locked out of future hospital contracts because their core products no longer meet the environmental compliance standards of their own customers.
It could be devastating.
It really could. We're about to find out if Solventum can engineer their way out of 3M's shadow, or if the umbilical cord they're still attached to will ultimately pull them under.